My name is Dom Price from Atlassian, and I'm Atlassian's word futurist. But at Experts Unleashed, I want to do something different with you. I want to bring experts from their field to you. Experts that aren't going to talk about thought leadership or theory, but they're going to bring their lived experience, their pragmatic insights, and their stories to help you unleash your potential. So the format of this show is incredibly simple. It's all based on three things. Every single session we do with an expert and Experts Unleashed, we're going to have three chapters, three core things that they are famous for, where we go through the theory, we go through the practice, and we get them to share one insight that you can try. So listen in for the three chapters. Hello, folks, and welcome to our next episode of Experts Unleashed, one I am particularly excited about. If you've not seen Experts Unleashed, a show that takes thought leadership, throws it out the window, there is no time for that in 2025, and instead brings you insights from experts in their field. I go hunting the world for experts that can bring you insights, pragmatism, ideas that can help you be a better leader. I want to first start out by thanking and acknowledging the people of the land I join you on today. I join you from Sydney, the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. I want to just pay my respects to their elders past and present. A beautiful country I join you from today. Now, today's guest, they join you from a different country, but actually this is probably one of my most well-traveled guests, a chap who started his life, I'm not going to say the year because I'll adversely age him, but let's just say it was raving in the 60s in Wiston in Liverpool. He has traversed the world. He's worked in the UK. He's worked across Europe. He's worked across Asia Pacific, in New Zealand, in Australia. He's done a lot of work for companies like Atlassian, where I work, Red Bull, Microsoft, Volvo, Cisco, across the US. You name it, this guy has been there. He's got like the ultimate. He's the trifecta. He's worked in public sector and private sector, right? He's worked in countries all over the world. And he's actually done the job that he now advises and consults on. You know, Colin, who's my guest today, has been, and kind of technically is, a project manager. He is a culture expert. But what he's done in the last few years is he's taken all that knowledge, that wisdom, that spontaneity, packaged it up into some quite amazing books. I've read a few of them. I've seen this guy present. I've seen him run workshops. And a person who's evolved to now be an expert on culture, which is fascinating. You think a lot of project people stay in the project space. This guy's going, you know what? For projects to be successful, the wrapper around the edge is culture. So please give me joining me in a warm Experts Unleashed welcome to the legend that is Colin Ellis. Colin, welcome to the show.
Mate, everyone's going to be really disappointed. They're going to be like, really? After that intro, I spend however long listening to this guy. Thank you. That's extremely generous of you. Thank you, my friend.
I'd imagine if the audience were guessing, not many had Colin Ellis by the time I finished that intro. But you worked in now. You worked with some like absolutely amazing organizations, and just for our audience's sake, that's what attracts me to you. It's not your accent or your suave style. It's the fact that you get to practice what you do with some amazingly complex and tricky organizations, and they invite you back, right? And that is a sign that you're actually delivering long-term value. I know Red Bull is an example. That started what? I'm kind of trying to do the math. 7 or 8 years ago, you started working with Red Bull?
Yeah, eight years ago, Dom. And what was interesting about that work is that that started with project management. You mentioned project management. And that started by the then GM of Red Bull in Sydney asking you if you knew anybody in project management. And I think you'd seen me speak and you were like, I heard this guy, you have a chat with him. And so that started there. But then quite by chance, a member of the senior leadership team in Austria read Culture Fix, which I published in 2019. And then that spawned the work that I've been doing with those guys for the past 5 years.
I love it. I love it. So, Colin, we always start out an episode with my user manual. For those that haven't watched the show before, first of all, shame on you. But my user manual is an exercise. You buy a TV, it comes with a user manual, right? You buy a stereo, user manual. You hire a human, no user manual. So we just assume how each other works. And I think we always I always get it wrong. It's an exercise I've done in offsites with leadership teams when I form a new team. Let's imagine we're doing my user manual. I know before the show, you picked the area of achieve, right, on my user manual. And I love that area, right? Talk to us like if I was trying to read my user manual of Colin Ellis and I got to that section on achieve, what would it tell me about you?
It would tell you that he started at the bottom rung of the ladder, having pretty much failed school, Dom. But he had a real, I wouldn't say curiosity back in those days, but I had a real passion for learning and passion for knowledge. And it's a cliche, I know, but I kind of worked my way up to a position where I felt that I could have a positive influence on things, but not only in terms of the way that we practice stuff, but also as a human being. I think that's one of the things that my parents gave me is to be a nice boy. I think I put that in one of the books. But I think, when I got passed over for a C-suite job in 2013, and I can't tell you how just disappointed that I was. And at that time, I pitched on kind of a culture agenda. And I called it culture in 2019, 2013, and they didn't want a bar of it. And at that point, I took a leap of faith. And yeah, I would never wanted to work for myself, but I felt like I had an approach that would work based on what I'd done in projects, and then worked really hard with no money, with two young children. We were 9 months into our Australian journey, and everyone thinks that kind of working for yourself is the panacea, and isn't it brilliant? They don't tell you the hard work, the graft, the late
The
nights,
zero salary, like there is
the
if you don't
zeros,
do any
the
work, there is no
zeros.
income.
Yeah, things were so bad, I had to take a contract just to pay the bills, and so I think, when I look back on my life, as well as all of the good stuff about family, yeah, and I don't often say this on podcasts, it sounds like Billy Big Head, but I'm really proud of the work that I've done, and every now and again, I allow myself to get emotional about that, because the sense of achievement is there, I just don't allow myself
Yeah.
to look back on it.
I feel like I can ask you this, first of all, because it's a lived experience for me, but also I class you as a friend as well. How do you kind of reconcile, understand the fact that, like, you started your career in whatever, like, in Liverpool, there's probably a path defined for you, right? That is the path that many other people took, and you've diverged off that, and you've achieved amazing things. Right? I've only ever known achieving Colin, right? So I've not seen the rat race, right? The chase Colin, but I can imagine it because I've had to do a little bit of that myself. We only grew up, so yeah, 15, 20 miles away from each other, right? So it's not a vastly different upbringing. How do you reconcile where you are today, the achievement, the success, the brand you have, with maybe what the rest of your family has, or your friends that you had growing up at school, or like that environment? How do you compare sort of 18-year-old Colin that I don't think he failed school, he just wasn't academic. That's the
That's
phrase we
right.
use these days, right? You
Yeah,
just weren't academic, Colin. That
yeah.
that person to the one you are now, how do you stay true to yourself, given that you are quite a different person now?
Yeah, that's a really great question, and actually, I wrote a blog on LinkedIn just last week about a friend I made when I started work, and so back in the day, I got my first job just by writing for one. I know that sounds ridiculous, but I went to work for NatWest Bank here in the UK, and they were just hiring young people. They had a new machine room with these big Burroughs computer terminals, and if you're over kind of 30, there's no way you can use that technology. Anyway, long story short, I met a guy there. We went to the same school. We were a year different. We became really great friends. I posted about this on LinkedIn, but I got in touch with him and said, "Listen, Rowan, I'm gonna put this post out on LinkedIn. I'm gonna um, share a photo of us in Tenerife. Is that cool?" He's like, "Yeah." He's like, he still works for the company. He still works for the bank. He's been there for 42 years or something like that. And he said, "How is it?" Because previously I'd posted a photo of me with a rugby player in St Helens. He's like, "How have you gone from working next to me on the counter to doing the work that you do?" And I think, Dom, I've always looked for opportunity. I never waited for it to come to me. People
No,
people
no,
said,
very
yeah,
true. You've
say, sorry.
tenacity and opportunity are 2 words I definitely use to describe you.
Yeah. Yeah, and so, I never I was never relentlessly ambitious. I didn't want to tread all over people. I wanted to do it in the right way. And, yeah, so I patience has been key for me, but I think, that relentless curiosity, I mentioned it, always interested in how things work, not just
Yeah,
technology, but also how people
yeah,
work. And,
people,
yeah,
yeah.
so that's been the pathway, yeah.
It's weird. I was always thinking, I think about this when I was preparing for the show. I'm almost curious, and you can't answer this, if it's an advantage that you weren't academic, because by not being academic, you've taken a very practical approach to everything, which I think comes out in your books and your work. And I'm just wondering, like, almost like a sliding doors moment, had you been more academic, like, I've met plenty of PhDs that honestly, mate, no offense, are probably a shed load more smarter than you,
No,
but
yeah.
not accessible. They've got all the literature in their head, but you're like, I can't understand you. And then you've got an ability to connect it in a way that's accessible. I'm always curious about how people's upbringing manifests in today in that practicality, the accessibility you've got, whether some of it comes from that upbringing, who knows?
Yeah, I think so, Dom. There's two things for my upbringing. The first thing is that my all my uncle, my dad was from a big family, classic Liverpool family. He was one of eight, and they all were working class. They did pretty menial jobs, and they just said it how it was. You're familiar with this in the north. They said it how it was, and so growing up in that kind of environment, and I don't mean in a bad way. I mean, you always knew exactly what they were talking about, and they would take the time to explain it. So that's the
There was
first
no
thing. The
there was
second.
no theatre. There was no theatre, there was no dance, there's no performance.
That's right. There was no drama except when they'd had a drink. And so, being brought up in that environment, just what I don't understand what you mean. Explain what you mean. I don't understand that. So that was the first thing. The second thing is the humor side of things. I think that's and we've talked about this. It's an icebreaker, and particularly in work. If you can reflect on yourself, if you can eject a little bit of humor every now and again, if you can marry practicality with humor, it lands so well. And some of the organizations that you mentioned at the start there, most of those and the longevity of work comes from the fact that I'm able to deliver a message and distill a message in a way that connects with people that do the real work. No
Yes.
disrespect to senior leaders.
No, no, but you're right. The plenty of senior leaders coming and read Harvard Business Review. They're like, "I'm good now," and you're like, "That's fine." Have you activated the people that are actually doing the work, and have they connected with it, which is a different goal altogether. So we've got 3 chapters to get through. Each one of these could be an episode in itself. So we're gonna have to be super northern snappy ass. The first one I love because I know you've spoken about this before. So let's just start out with the controversial chapter one. Um, Culture is a choice. I love this. I absolutely adore it. Because I just find I don't know what's happened in the last few years. It's talked about as this like amorphous thing that just happens. Why did you pick culture as a choice, and what does it mean to you?
Because it's always the place that I start with senior leaders, Don, whenever I talk to them. I think employees generally, they understand that actually, if we take the time and understand what we need to build in order to deliver the strategy, and you give me the skills on how to do it, we'll be good. But that's not the route that most senior leaders take. In Detox Your Culture, which is my latest book, I start the book with like 3 pages of facts about culture. And what often interests me is most organizations, most CEOs will say we're data driven, we're looking for the latest data. And yet I can give them every single bit of research, every single fact that demonstrates that if you put time, effort, and money into building a great culture, you not only get all of the results that you need to deliver your strategy, you become an employer of choice. So you have a list, you have a queue of people. Um, and so I still don't think it's well understood, particularly by leaders, that you get the culture that you choose to build. And if you choose to do no meaningful work on it, then you'll just have a stagnant culture, something that just stinks. It's a real simple equation. We've talked about this in the past. Is there's a disproportionate amount of time spent on strategy as opposed to
Yes.
culture, and
Yeah.
they're both as important.
I mean, that alone as a challenge is interesting. Like for every dollar you're spending on strategy, like what are we going to do? You should be spending maybe at least $1.50, maybe $2 on like how are we then going to go and execute that? Otherwise, a whole of execs sat around in a vineyard somewhere, had a nice shot on a whiteboard. I get like the plan you've come up with, and you've done the trade offs, and you've understood the competition. Like brilliant, that's a great plan. We've now got 11 and a half months to go and deliver on that. That's culture, right? And that's the underinvested part. Given the sort of the narrative around culture recently, it has been spoken about a lot more. What do you think the gap is for these leaders between like those facts that you present and them kind of absorbing that and grokking it and doing something with it?
I would say there are still some people my age, mid-50s, who are clinging on to the past, and what they're trying to do is trying to cling on to the way that they were managed, which was very command and control. If I tell people what to do, they will do it. We will get the results. And there's almost this ignorance, and I don't think it's conscious most of the time, Dom. I don't want
No,
people
no,
listening to this
I'm with you.
thinking that
I'm
I'm
with you on that. It's not
yeah.
malicious. It's
No,
learned
no
helplessness
way.
almost. It's learned behavior. Yeah.
That's right. It's a learned behavior. We ape what we see. And so I think people are still clinging on to that rather than educating themselves. And we see it all the time in generations. Oh, this new generation. I had this conversation last week in Europe. Oh, this generation. I'm like, this generation, I've got so much to offer if only you would open the gate and let them in. So I think that a lot of people are clinging on in the hope that they can continue those old-fashioned ways. But the world's fundamentally changed about, kind of, well, 2008 really, and that's how, people have got to start thinking if they want to get the most out of their working cultures.
So if you're a leader listening now, you're like, all right, I agree. Culture is a choice. I'm going to buy Detox the box. Great read. It is a really good read. I'm going to read that. What are some of the steps I can take as a frontline leader now to choose the path of positive, right? Appreciation culture, recognition, like that one where I become an employer of choice. How do I go about starting on that path?
Well, recognizing what those pillars of culture are, Dom.
Mm,
I think often culture's put in the too hard basket because leaders don't choose to educate themselves on it. Hence,
yes.
culture is a
Yeah.
choice.
Well, it's
You,
also not seen as scientific, right? It's seen as
that's
some
right.
weird kind of black art. And they're like, oh, that's going to be a people person. It's going to be a fluffy presentation. I've got to say nice things. So versus going, actually, as you present in the book, it's quite scientific. Like, do
Yeah.
these things well, good things happen.
Yeah, that's right. And so when I wrote Culture Fix, gosh, 6 years ago now, I went and had all of the look a look at these great cultures around the world, of which Atlassian was one of them. And I'm like, what are the things that they have in common? And so if you're a leader, the things to think about. There are six pillars. There's vision and purpose. So what's our aspiration? So what do we want to achieve or what do we want to be known for? There's a set of core values. So what unites us as employees, kind of what are our emotional principles? How do we build relationships and communicate with each other? So personality and communication. And we know that, kind of empathy is the glue that holds teams together. Then how do we behave towards each other as human beings? And included in that is how do we, maintain equity and all of these good things. How do we work together? Collaboration, and that includes workspace and methods and process. And then how do we make time for new ideas and creativity, innovation? And I think so once leaders understand, they can take those six things and go, okay, well, what are we doing in each of these? What are we doing to help people build relationships with each other? The answer to that question for most organizations is we make
No,
no time for it whatsoever.
no. It's probably
Do we have a
punished.
vision? Yes, great.
Are they I've read the book, so I kind of get this, but this is an interesting one. Are those six things in sequence?
Generally, what happens is, and again, being an optimistic realist, I know that the strategy is usually the thing that's written first, and the strategy usually is a link to a vision or a purpose, that aspiration. Here's our aspiration. Here's all the things. Here's all our objectives to achieve that. So I tend to think, Dom, that vision and purpose are the things that come first. But then, in order to create a great culture, into the next one in the sequence is personality and communication. Because if we don't build relationships between people, it's very hard then to give them agency over things like values, behavior, collaboration, innovation. And so there's often not. It's a great question. No one's ever asked me that before, but I did get asked it at a conference, and it was a COO said, "How should I do this?" And I started with a vision and purpose. So if you've got that's your goal, whatever. I was like, but it really doesn't matter in which order you do it, as long as you do it within a tight time frame. Yeah,
Yeah, you need the complete set, and they need to be congruent, right? They need to be
that's
consistent
right.
in the red thread. So it's really the rationale behind that question was I've seen about a few that my customers I'm working with right now, and as you were going through, I was like, yes, yes, no. Right? I fell short at the people in relationships bit. And it's fascinating because it's the things after that they're trying to fix. Right. So there's an organization I'm working with now. They're like, we want to be more innovative. We want our people to come up with more ideas. Right. So they're doing all the classic innovation things that me and you've seen that I've pulled my hair out, yours keeping yours. And you're like, without the people in relationships bit, you'll never get the innovation. It's a second order effect, but they're trying to fix the thing that's obviously broken without understanding the knock on impact of those other five elements.
Yeah. And it all goes back to my project management days, Dom. So I became a project manager in '97. I was selling advertising space in the Liverpool Echo, and they were like, "You're good with people. You're good with teams. we need people to do Y2K, you'll do. It was scraping the bottom of the barrel. But I didn't know anything about being a project manager, right? And so my boss at the time, this great guy from Newcastle, he was just like, listen, you just need to create a team here, and then I need a plan, and then we need to deliver these 8 projects. And I wrote down, build a team, build a plan, deliver the project. And that became my mantra. I even wrote it in one of the books. And so if you don't build a good team, you can't really build a plan. And then you got no chance of delivering on it. And yet most teams will start delivering, doesn't matter what it is, operations, projects, and then do the planning after that. And then when that breaks down, then they build the relationships. Whereas if they'd done it the right way around first, then they'd have a great culture.
So I had Bob Hutton, Bob Sutton. I had Bob Sutton and Huggy Rao on the show last year. They talked about an experiment they'd done through Stanford where they had two sets of teams, A and B test. A got just start the work, and B got build a team charter. How are you going to work together? What's your culture? What are your norms? What are your rituals? And they basically built a social contract. There's a couple of fascinating elements of it. The team that built the social contract looked slower for the first like 4 or 5 weeks because they invested time in building the ground, the sort of foundations. The team that started looked faster. And by week 4, they were even. And by week 5, the team with the charter were flying. The team without were thrashing and arguing. And I thought you were doing that, and you thought I was doing that. All those things that we know and love from teams, where you're like, if we just sort this out in the first place. So it kind of proved what they knew. The really scary bit was they showed the data. You talk about data informed, right? Data driven. They showed the data to a whole lot of leaders, and they pointed at the projects they'd kill. It was the ones that had the charter because they looked slower at first, right? So it just shows how like they looked slower, the other one looked faster. One of them delivered outcomes, the other one didn't, and you're like, oh, it turns out without real data, I don't make a good informed decision. And so there is science again that backs that. The thing is, there is no amount of people I tell that story to, then don't go, I'm just going to go and start something. You're like, what is, I don't know what's wrong with the business society right now. But like I talked about knowledge obesity, like we know this stuff and we forget to apply it. It's crazy.
That's right. Yeah,
Have
and
you have
our
you got
atten
any
our
secrets?
I was going to say
I
our
was gonna say,
attention
yeah,
is being hammered from all sides, that we don't really absorb the things that matter, and so
yeah.
most of our knowledge tends to be about the things that matter tend to be superficial, which is fascinating.
You're right. There's just such a volume of signal and noise, right? LinkedIn, books, theories, leader consulting. You're like, of those 50 things, bits of inspiration I just got shared, which one am I meant to do? Like, which one's the best thing to do? How do you break through? Like, when you're dealing with leaders that are struggling, I imagine most of the leaders that are listening to this, they're not listening to this for confirmation that they're nailing their culture. They're listening to this because they're like, hey, I want some red hot tips of how to do this better. How do you help sort of break some of that mindset of either denial or ignorance and shift someone into, you know what? Let's start taking pragmatic action here.
Yeah, every leadership team needs something different, Dom. That's something that I recognized when I first started working for myself, is I would very much tailor everything that I do to the leadership team that I'm working with or the organization that I'm working with. Some preferred, when I work with engineering organizations, they prefer a lot of data, and then I have to keep presenting the data until they get to the bit of data that they're really, really looking for. And often I don't know which bit of data that is. But I'll eventually get there. For some, it's case studies. Some want case studies of the people that I've worked with. How long did it? I did a presentation earlier this week, and someone said, right, well, how soon can I expect change? And that's a classic leadership question. I worked with a team that delivered fundamental change, so a 30% shift in engagement in 3 months. And then I went through the exact steps that we went through, which was leadership ownership, leadership role modeling, management training, common language of culture, and then no tolerance, something that Atlassian do really well, no tolerance for brilliant jerks, no tolerance for those people who seem like they're deliberately trying to hold a culture back, but more often than not, they're afraid of the change. So, it really does depend on the organization, but facts matter. I think for leadership teams, what they're looking for is comfort that the investment that they make in culture will pay them back eventually, and it will. But it depends kind of how far gone their culture is, which we'll talk about shortly. Yeah, in terms of being able to get it back.
I imagine there's elements for you that you're like, if you're going in there and it's only slightly broken, you're like, oh, this is boring. You're like, Give me the one that's an absolute basket case where you can really test, right, your frameworks, your content.
Yeah.
That's gonna take longer for a return. I thought there's a lot of organizations I work with, I use the simple like -1, 0, or 1. I'm like, if you're a -1, I need to get you to a 0 first and be comfortable at a 0, then I can get you to a 1. But you don't
That's
get
right.
to jump straight to 1. Because all you're gonna get is organ rejection. If you try and consume number 1 now, you're not prepared for it, you're not ready for it, which is fascinating. What's some of the resistance you get from the leaders? What some of the there must be some common lines that you hear of, "You don't understand our business or our industry," or "That won't work here," or "It's more important that we deliver." The one I love hearing is, "People just won't be told." And I'm like, "They won't." But I agree with you, like, they definitely won't just be told.
So the two main ones. So yeah, you don't understand our industry is a great one, and I've worked with pretty much every industry. I think I've worked with like 120 teams in 24 countries. I think it is now. And it's true that I don't fully understand their business, but largely I'll do my homework prior to the meeting to understand their industries. That's the first one. Secondly, the resistance is it's going to cost how much? And don't get me wrong, it's not like I'm charging £1 million to do the work, but I think they expect culture to happen for free. Can you just come in and do a talk and that'll do it, won't it? Yeah, yeah, that'll do it. Actually, you know what? It's all right. I won't go down the rabbit hole, but I'll briefly mention that might be it for some people. I'm never in the business of overselling. If a company doesn't
Yeah,
need
no,
much,
I'm with
right?
you. It's rare.
Yeah,
It's rare 'cause
it's
yeah,
rare.
similar
Yeah,
bit. Every now and then I'll go and do it very rarely, but every now and then I'll go and do a keynote. I'm like, "That's tipped you over the edge. It's giving you a bit of provocation, bit of a nudge. That's all you needed." Very, very rare. 99% of the time, they need that and a workshop and the activation and then the removal of bad behaviors so they can add in the new one. It's not I think that the danger in your field is people think it's addition, and actually a lot of your work is subtraction. It's how can I get rid of the bad things to give yourself room for the good things. It's not just sprinkling in some good. It's not bean bags on a coffee machine.
yeah, exactly right. At a yoga class, it's none of those things. And I just want to mention that the third thing, which is the thing that I get probably most of the time, is the timing's not right. And as soon as I hear the timing's not right, I immediately know that the timing is right because
Yeah, yeah.
the
It's a
waiting,
weird
waiting,
universal
waiting.
truth, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
I,
So they're the
I,
three main ones. Yeah.
oh, mate, I ran a workshop the other week at an event, and I had this. You would have loved it. There was this moment where this guy's like, "Yeah, we want to make this change, but it's probably just worth waiting till there's a burning platform because then it's easier to change." And you're like, I was like, "I want to give you a hug because you're not wrong. If you have a burning platform, you don't have to lead anymore. The company has to change because otherwise it burns down.
That's
I
right.
can't help but think as a leader, if you know that already, you can get ahead of that and prevent that from happening." And he's like, "Oh no, I could, but that's not how the reward and recognition system works in my organization. If I prevent it from happening, it never happened. But if
Yeah.
I let it go wrong, like it's an organization that rewards firefighting, so he's waiting for the fire." And I'm like, "Oh, I'm like, yeah, it's
It's,
way
you know,
cheaper."
I I did a proposal for an organization. We had about 4 meetings, Dom, and the time was right. They'd been in the press for the culture, and I said the time is right. And then the CEO said, "Colin, the time's not right now. We're going to make some senior leadership changes." And then they were in the media again for their toxic culture, and they got absolutely hammered. And I wanted to email him and say, I wish we'd have done it, you know. And the head of HR just came back to like, Colin, I'm so sorry we didn't activate this work. And I'm like, I'm really sorry too. I didn't want this to happen, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, it's a tricky one.
Yeah.
Let's move on to chapter 2. You talk about vibrant cultures having a common language.
Mm.
I'm fascinated by this one. What does that mean?
Well, so people don't know how to talk about culture. So culture's a choice, right? So yes, we want leaders to understand that they have a responsibility to create a strategy and then create a culture strategy and then activate that. But employees need a common language. They need a way of talking about culture. Interestingly, when I started working with Red Bull, that was one of the key things. So Red Bull have a pretty vibrant culture. It's an organization I love working with. But employees didn't have a way of talking about culture. So every now and again, we'd find we have a pocket of pleasant where it's really, really nice. But actually, we just need a little bit more vibrant. We need to get there. And so really it's about giving employees that sense of what culture is. So you mentioned at the start about the practicality. It's just a simple way of talking about culture and a simple way of being able to recognize where your culture is at any one time without waiting for a pulse review or an engagement survey. What are those cues? What are those signals? What are those micro experiences that you're having that give you a sense of where you are such that you can change it? And we either say the culture's great or the culture's shit. They're the two
Yeah, it's
things that we
binary.
say as employees. So,
Yeah,
and it's way more nuanced than that, as we both know.
yeah. So like, talk us through what are some of those signals or senses? Like, if you're, again, frontline leader, you're like, I don't want to wait for my next 6 monthly pulse survey. I don't want to wait for the CEO to decide we need a diagnostic from an external firm to come and work out. Like, I've got a set of senses. What are the things I should be looking for?
So there are two element, two kind of human elements evident every single day of work, and they are emotional intelligence and engagement. Emotional intelligence is kind of, what do people know about each other? Do they recognize their emotions? Are they able to manage their emotions? Kind of in a way that generates collaboration. So that's the first thing. Can people bring their best self to work? Engagement tends to be how much do they care? How much they care about their job? How much they care about their organization? How much they care about its vision, its values? Like how much they care about their team? And so these two things are evident. And when you have low emotional intelligence, Dom, which has been downplayed for far too long in our cultures,
Way too long. Yeah.
way too long. We know it's the difference between success and failure. But when you have low emotional intelligence, when you have low engagement, you have a stagnant culture. So stagnant cultures is when people are selfish. They only want the conditions that suit them and not the team. They're generally protecting their super fund or their pension fund.
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
It is quite individualistic behavior.
Yes, that's right. People think
Yeah,
they can do whatever they want, lots of email
yeah,
ghosting, people don't respond to calendar requests. They just wanna do their own thing, and there's never any challenge. People often say, "Oh, do stagnant cultures ever turn toxic?" I'm like, "No, because people just don't care." They just wanna come in, pick up their wage, and go home. Yeah,
everyone's given up so much that
that's
they're
right.
just allowing it to stagnate, and it's a slow, painful paper cut type death, but it's like,
Yeah.
it'll just meander along until it's no longer relevant,
Make the same mistakes over and over, and like
repeatedly.
people banging their heads against the wall going, "Why do we keep doing it?" But then no one ever goes, "Right, well, I'm gonna change it." So stagnant cultures, usually engagement scores about between 20 and 40%. Now, when you've got low engagement but high emotional intelligence, you've got lots of empathy, and so that's a good thing. We want people to come into work with the best of intent. The problem is it's just a bit too nice. And I think listeners will know what I mean. Like it's nice, it's fine, but everybody's copied into everything. Everybody gets invited to everything. You get, kind of decision avoidance, Dom, where nobody can be bothered to actually make a decision. And so these are really just pleasant cultures. They're nice to work in. You just never get anything done that's meaningful that gives you a real sense of achievement. I'm sure you've come across these kind of cultures as
It's
well.
funny, the ones of those that I've seen tend to have been a reaction to something else. So it's like, we didn't have a good culture and they've misunderstood what culture is. They're like, let's bring everyone to everything and always be nice to each other. And that shows that, we've got engagement and psychological safety because we're always being nice. And there's a leader last year, I was like, no, you're not having the hard conversation, and that's not nice.
That's right.
I actually think that's mean, because you're not giving anyone feedback. You're not giving anyone brutal truths, right? You're not giving anyone a chance to improve. You've basically signed up for mediocrity, but
Yeah.
everyone's invited. So I said that, you might as well just call it kumbaya, right? You're all sat around singing nicely, but who's going to say, like, you're out of tune, you're not playing the guitar well? We can get better. It's not a critique, but like, we're not. We're just going, it's lovely, it's nice, it's lovely.
Yeah. These are the organizations, Dom, that spend £1 million on well-being programs when they could spend £100,000 to get rid of the staff that undermine the safety and cause the
Yeah,
well-being issues in the first place.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah,
So
because
that's
they're all so
sorry.
nice. That's a good point. They're so nice that even the evil people are nice.
Yeah.
Everyone's nice. Yeah,
Yeah, and people make excuses for them. Oh, they probably got a lot going on in their personal life.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
just like,
yeah. There's a lot of
no, they're just
rationalization.
idiots.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They're
So
never
we're
going to turn. Like, is that when the market turns, they're not going to turn. They're going to stay in that placid moment.
yeah, 100%. They're gonna wait for it to fall and then go, "I told you so." Yeah.
Also,
So when you have high engagement, so when you get it kind of above the line, you get results. But if you have low emotional intelligence, high engagement, low emotional intelligence, you just go about it in the wrong way. And so we understand why the work is important. So that's why engagement, is high. But poor behaviors, we were busy as a badge of honor. You're busy,
Oh,
you've
yeah.
got lots on. I've done a 60-hour week. Great, you're crap at
Yeah.
managing your time.
I'm in a
Thanks for being
forum and
you.
a guild and a committee. I mean, all the
Yeah.
things. You're like, "Are you effective?" You're like, "No, I'm really busy doing literally moving bits of paper around."
Yeah, you want to be invited to everything. Invite me in, copy me into
Yeah.
that, CC me into that. You can. This is where micromanagement lives in these what I would call combatant cultures. Everything's a fight. Everything's a battle. You hear phrases like, "We just have to drag this over the line." Oh, we'll drag him in, kicking and screaming. It doesn't matter. We use this real combative language, Dom. And again, when people are able to recognize it, they're like, with any of these cultures, they're like, oh my God, we're in a combatant culture right now. What do we need to do to shift
Yeah.
it? And it's
But it's the
usually to
airspace.
moderate the behavior. Yeah,
It's the airspace, right? So it's the ability to step back a few yards from it and go, "Hang on, what's actually happening?" When they see it, they tend not to deny it, but they're so busy in the moment, they can't come out and see it.
that's right. That's exactly right. So yeah, everything's a fight, everything's a battle. And the thing is about combatant cultures, I always say, again, optimistic realist, everybody needs a little bit of this every now and again for the smallest moment in time. And often you'll see it like a senior leader or a manager will lose control of their emotion. They'll, and we talking about temper in work. They'll lose control of their emotion just for a microsecond. And if they follow that up with humility, and say, "I'm really sorry. I didn't mean for it to come out in the way that it is." And as long as it's not derogatory to another human being, the analogy I often use is they take the air out of the room, and you're like, for a minute, you're like, "Oh," but then afterwards, you're like, "We needed to hear that." And as long as you don't stay there, people are
Yeah.
like, "Right, we need to get our stuff together here because we're just not delivering."
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah,
Mate,
but
that's good. Underline that one. That's an amazing call, right? Using that sparingly in the right moment and pulling back from it, outstanding. The
yeah,
problem is, I think a lot of leaders get the sensation they're like, "That worked.
yeah,
I'll do that again." And they repeat that same, and you're like, if you have to bang the table and cry every time to get something done, that's not effective anymore, right? We're now
that's right.
creating this, what side are you taking versus that. I think I just literally had a moment where, as you told that story, I thought of a moment where someone had shared that tacit, that moment of emotion, and you're like, "Whoa," and then brought it back, and you're like, "Right, we're in." Like, everyone got behind them. Misuse that, and that is a quite a manipulative culture.
Well, two things happen, Dom. They either stop taking it seriously and they go, just let
Yeah,
the air come out of the balloon. Don't worry, we'll be able
yeah,
to throw it in
yeah.
the bin in a
They've
minute.
got form for this. They do it all the
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
Here we go.
So that's the first
See the
thing.
drama.
Yeah. Just let them get it out of their system. Frustrated
Yeah.
actor, never trod the
Yeah.
boards. Um, so that's the first thing. The second thing is they stay there. And this is where you create the conditions for toxicity. And so a consistently combatant culture is kind of, there's three layers of toxic culture. That's the first level where sustained profanities, kind of the effing and the jeffing. There's high stress, high anxiety, and there are consistent microaggressions. So that's consistently combatant. The next level of toxic culture is corrosive. So then there's bullying, then there's harassment, then there's unethical behavior. Because at this point, those people have got away with that behavior for too long. They keep doubling down. They keep doubling
Well, they've
down
probably
and
not just got
doubling
away
down.
with it, mate. Probably been recognized for it.
Yeah. Yeah,
They're
true. Yeah, yeah.
rewarded for it.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And then the third level is harmful. And that's kind of physical abuse and lies, cover-ups, fraud, racism, homophobia, all of the real just nasty, bad stuff that no human being should ever be exposed to in work. And it all came from that combatant
From
culture.
that, what? Yeah. The sad part about that is that's the time we read about it in the paper.
Yeah.
And when one does the investigation, you see that deterioration over time. You had many chances to intervene and stop, but instead of intervening, that person delivered. So you recognize them. They delivered by burning out their team and putting all fear of God into them. That's not sustainable. So it's,
Yeah.
yeah, that's a tricky one. Is there
So
any kind of
sorry,
words
can
or
I just finish?
phrases?
Let me finish my
Oh
quadrant,
yeah,
mate, because I ended on toxic.
oh
The
yeah.
word, where,
I'm
where
still
you want
drawing
to,
it.
where you want to be is high engagement and high emotional intelligence. And that's a
Yeah.
vibrant culture where managers understand how to build culture in the first place. We give employees agency over it. The values actually mean something and we know how to put them in practice. We move on the people that don't want to be part of the culture. Usually they self-select when we've defined it in a really unique way. We celebrate success. We look for ways to remove stress. We have good balance. We have good flexibility. But the key thing with vibrant cultures, Don, is they deliver time after time after time after time because of all of those factors that I just mentioned.
I'd also, I think this is in the book. It was a while ago that I read it. I think they're also more adaptable. It's not just
Yeah.
deliver on knowns. Because of that culture, you're more open to go, "Hey, Mary, I know this isn't my area, but like, can we have a chat about this? Because I think we can improve this." Like, you're more likely to have that conversation because you've got the give a shit factor, and you're emotionally intelligent, and you want to help other people. Like, it's all in service of something bigger than yourself. Versus when you're not, you're like, "Well, my patch is fine. I don't care if you fail. In fact, I do care if you fail because then I'll look better." And
Yeah,
and
that's
and
right.
they
Yeah, there's no fear, there's no suspicion, there's no patch protection. There's a focus on continual improvement of self and continual improvement of the team. And feedback is consistent. We never wait till the end of the year. That's a nice culture. We wait to combat a pleasant culture. And you're right. There's this, this is where you get this continual, consistent improvement. I know Atlassian do it, Red Bull do it so well is feedback in the moment. We've instituted some things to help people to get better at that so that you never miss an opportunity to improve.
yeah, 'cause you're right. That same data point held for a year is nice because 'cause you're like, "Hey, last February, Colin, you did this thing that I
Yeah.
didn't like, but I'm now gonna tell us," and you're like, "Well, there's nothing I can do about that because that's a
That's
year
right.
ago now." You're like, "Anyway, thanks," and you're like, Nothing changes. You just do the dance."
That's exactly right. Yeah.
The word you've mentioned a few times, I just wanna click on quickly, agency, 'cause it keeps on coming up in lots of different conversations. When you think about agency in the workplace, what's your, like, 60-second view of how you think about it?
So every employee should have agency to work with their teammates. And what I mean by that is you should be given the opportunity to sit down with the people that you're working with and say, how do we need to behave towards each other? How do we need to work together? What tools do we use? What's acceptable? What's not acceptable? When do we take time? When do we have a break? What time are we making for new ideas in order to live the values and to deliver to our targets? So when I say agency, it's mainly time, Don, but also money for people to sit together, usually at the start of the year. And this is what I used to do with my own teams back in 2007, is we used to spend 2 days together at the start of the year just to agree how
Yeah,
we were going to do this thing called work
yeah,
this year.
same. It's not
And
it's not
and
rocket
yeah,
science.
it's
The
not.
reason
It's not.
the reason I ask is I'm seeing a trend that you wouldn't say is against agency, but inadvertently it is. So many leaders right now, I think it's because the economy's a bit slow, a bit of tension in world economics and politics, whatever else. People are going, "I need more consistency. I wanna standardize everything." And in standardizing, they're taking away the agency. They don't realize they're taking away agency, but in doing that, they're creating, like, highly paid but quite dumb individuals who are like, "I used to have agency and now I don't, and so I'm not gonna think for myself anymore." And that's really, if all they do is follow the process and procedure, that shit gets dangerous really quickly versus giving them that, what is this, the right amount of space and freedom to give an intelligent adult that you've hired to do a job, give them that space and freedom to pick their own adventure and trust them to do it.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a
Yeah.
challenge. Now,
Completely agree.
chapter 3, which is, this one I'm interested about because this is like boom on topic for this audience. Managers are the difference between success and failure. Mic drop. So talk to us, like, for all the managers who have sat through the first few chapters going, "It's my leader's fault," and they're like, "Oh shit! Apparently, chapter 3 is gonna drop it on me." What are managers doing, or what should they do, or shouldn't they do to be more effective here?
So I just want to make the point that leaders set the tone for everything. That, there
Yes.
was one survey that I read that 87% of people said that the CEOs that should be the role model for the culture. 100%. Every time I start a new culture piece of work with any organization, I always start with the leadership team. However, managers are the day-to-day culture carriers. So they are the people that need to have the knowledge in order to instill it in their people about what needs to happen in the right way in order to deliver. And the key here, Dom, is, and managers will thank me for saying this, is we don't train people how to be managers. There's an expectation based on the length of tenure or your technical experience that all of a sudden you have the skills to be a manager. And
It's
it's
it's like
just
it's
not
like 1
true.
July,
Yeah.
1 July, we're giving you a new title. Here's some magic dust that makes you good at that. Like in our world, it's profound. It's like you're an amazing developer. You're an amazing developer. You're an amazing developer. Now you're a manager, and they're like, oh,
Yeah.
what? Oh, like, oh, like it's there's almost zero overlap between those two roles, and we just anoint them. And we do a lot of investment in training, but I've seen it in other organizations where like you don't just anoint someone and they become that. It's
That's
not like
right.
a man effect.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. And you ask any manager, do you have the skills to do the job? A minimum of 2/3 will say no, and they're crying out for it. Yet we spend billions of pounds every year on leadership development programs where we don't even measure whether the people actually become leaders. Not that I'm saying that's a bad thing, but it's disproportionate to the actual day-to-day skills, things like expectation setting, which is a skill in itself, courageous conversations, understanding of culture, and how to build a great team. It doesn't come naturally to these things. We're not born with these skills. And so what we need to do is really educate our managers. And somebody asked me last week, when you look back on your work and why has it been successful? I was like, because I give managers the skills. They're the people that make the work successful. I'm really fortunate. But all I do is work with the kind of learning team to say, okay, well, here's a contemporary management development program. Let's give them these skills, then let's provide support, but also let's measure how they're doing, because some people just aren't cut out to be managers, but we almost don't know what to do with them. Promote them because that's the only way to pay them more, and then blame them when they don't deliver, even though they didn't have the skills and they didn't want to manage people to begin with.
Yeah, I think on purpose, not by accident, we've got a larger percentage of individual contributors now at Atlassian than ever before. And that's because years ago, our founders were like, hey, there's a whole lot of people that are an amazing employee. Here's the value they deliver. They're smart. They're the expert in this field. Like, they're brilliant, but they don't want to manage people. And the system was you had to have so many reports to be successful. And they're like, no. So like some of our most senior architects who are highly paid, very senior people, have no direct reports. But all they do is that subject matter expertise, but they're a multiplier. If they get that architecture right, that multiplies out to positive. If they get it wrong, it multiplies out as well. Let them just do that because the value is to the organization. I'm hopeful that in the next few years we can change that idea that the only way to be valuable in an organization is to have lots of people reporting to you.
Yeah, yeah, it's a really outdated model, right? And I worked with a team in the north of England a couple of years ago, and again, they were very much focused on the hierarchical approach, and the inference at the time was the manager wasn't doing their job, and I spent a bit of time with the manager, and he's like, I'm really uncomfortable. Any skills you can give me is great. And so we spent about 2 hours together talking about all kinds of things, and I went back to the head of HR and said, what about if we change the structure of this team to a squad where we appoint a different person to be the captain of the squad every month and we rotate that. And she said, well, what does that look like in terms of pay? I'm like, well, let's just be creative about that. Let's not think about it as a traditional structure. Anyway, a long story short, it worked really, really well. And everybody was happy to have a little bit of responsibility some of the time, but nobody wanted the managerial responsibility all of the time. And it just worked for that team. But I think we're so fixed on this kind of A plus B plus C plus D equals E approach, kind of that waterfall, like cascade approach.
Yeah. That and the fixation on the org chart, like who
Yeah, oh,
you
yeah.
work for, like the lines of the org chart determine, for me, nothing. They determine who approves my expenses, but who I work with for me is substantially more important than who I work for.
Yeah.
In most organizations, it's the other way around, right? If you're a manager out there, and this is a horrible question to ask you, but I'm going to ask you anyway. You're a manager out there who's struggling. Are there any like quick tips or tricks or hacks you can give them just to give them a little bit of airspace to go and see some improvement?
Yeah, I would, write down the things that you're good at. I always think it always starts with that recognition of there are some things that you do well. So take a quiet moment to write down some things that you do really well. And listen, when we're all as humans, we're really hard on ourselves, but it's really important that you acknowledge your strengths and the things that you do well, which we're so focused on the things that we're not so good at.
So
Recognize
focused on the negative.
Yes, so focused. Recognize that nobody is the complete employee, and you don't have any weaknesses unless it's a mistake you make over and over and over and over again, in which case you probably need a coach. We're trying to do the best we can with what we have. And if there are some opportunities for improvement that you have, don't wait for someone to educate you. Go and educate yourself. I think that, the best piece of advice I always give to managers, particularly from a culture perspective, Dom, is you can do it your way. And I don't mean be a maverick. I don't mean create a cult and lead people towards the edge of a cliff. But if you see some unhealthy cultural norms, emails, meetings, don't conform. Do something different. Be someone that people will follow. Be unconventional. Like we don't celebrate the unconventional people. We tend to celebrate the people that have 100 emails in their inbox and have back-to-back meetings all day. So yeah, take a little bit of time to educate yourself. Know that you're one of many people out there. Look for podcasts like this that are free. Distill the information down. Pick one thing, try it. Your goal is to get 5% better every month, and that equates to 60% in a year, and that'd be amazing.
Yeah. If I'd plus one to all that. The identity one, I think, is crucial. The be okay putting a little bit of your DNA into however you want to work. Like, don't wait. Like, if you wait for the process or the procedure, you're not going to like it. But like, find your way of navigating it, and if it works, do more of it. If it doesn't, you've learned something. But like, give it a try. I feel like there's this tension of like people that are passengers that want to be drivers, but they're not sure how to drive. You're like, you get behind the wheel. Like it's like me and you took driving lessons. It wasn't in a simulator. It was behind the wheel of a car. You're like, at some point, that's the thing you've got to do as a manager. You've just got to practice and see what happens. I think I find on the whole people are very forgiving. So like you learn a huge amount along the way. Colin, for those that want to learn more about you, what you do, I know you post a huge amount of content. Where are people best discovering the wonderful wisdom of Mr. Colin Ellis?
So you can find me at my website, colindellis.com. I write a daily blog on culture these days, Dom. LinkedIn is where most people tend to follow me or find me. And if you're interested in finding out what kind of culture you have, I worked with the University of Georgia to produce a culture tool that sends you a report with a list of things that you can do. And you can find that at 5culturesquiz.com.
Yeah, I would strongly recommend that. That is a great, like, if you're looking for a very quick diagnostic to just give you a sense of where stuff's at, and that's not just Colin wisdom. That's Colin wisdom with research and university backing,
That's
right? So
right.
that ultimate
Yeah.
combination.
Yeah.
Colin, as a thank you for your time today, and we really do appreciate you giving up your time. I know you're in huge demand. We're going to do a donation to a charity of your choosing. Can you let us know which charity we're donating to and why you chose it?
It's the Save the Children charity, Dom. It's something that my nan used to support. She had no money, and yet she used to pay 50p a week to save the children. And she used to say, children have no choice into the circumstances in which they're born, and this little bit of money can help them. I'm getting emotional thinking about it. And
Yeah.
so it's a charity I've always supported too.
Brilliant. All right, we'll do a donation on your behalf.
Thank you.
Colin, thanks so much for that. Thanks. Go onto his website, colindellis.com. Look at LinkedIn, look at some of his stuff, and get yourself a copy of Detox. That is an absolute. I've recommended it to so many people who've pinged me afterwards and gone, thank you. That was the exact antidote I needed. And I'm like, yeah, no shit.
Thank you, man.
Colin, thank you so much for your time, your wisdom, your expertise.
Thank you, Dom. Thanks for having me on.